November 25th, 1177. Picture a battlefield soaked in the crimson light of dawn. On one side, 26,000 warriors, the undefeated army of Sultan Saladin. On the other, a dying teenage king, strapped to his horse, leading 500 men into certain annihilation. You think you know history. You have read the textbooks, seen the documentaries, but what if I told you that one of the most unbelievable moments in human history, a moment where the very laws of mathematics were broken, has been distilled down to footnotes? Today we are going to unearth the true story of the Battle of Montgisard, a clash so impossible it still defies explanation. This is not just a tale of ancient battles, it is a raw, visceral journey into the heart of human will, a brutal reminder that sometimes, when everything is lost, when the odds are so stacked against you that logic itself screams surrender, one person's refusal to quit can change the world. You need to hear this story because it will challenge everything you think you know about strength, courage, and what it truly means to be alive. Imagine a city, Jerusalem, in 1177. Not the golden, idealized city of legend, but a crumbling, desperate place, its walls scarred by 80 years of siege, its streets echoing with emptiness, because anyone with sense, anyone with options, fled months ago. This is the heart of Christendom, defended by fewer soldiers than a typical modern high school has students. The entire kingdom, this fragile foothold in the Holy Land, is stitched together by scar tissue and denial, and on its rotten throne sits a boy named Baldwin IV. He is 16 years old, and he is dying. His hands are wrapped in linen, but beneath the bandages, the flesh is rotting, bone showing through in places. His joints swell, his skin splits, his nervous system is disintegrating. Leprosy. In the 12th century, it is not just a disease, it is a divine curse made visible. Lepers ring bells to warn others of their approach. They are buried in unmarked graves, erased from family records. They are treated as if they died the moment the first white patch appeared. But Baldwin's father saw something else in him, intelligence, a mind that cut through problems like a blade through silk. So when his father died suddenly, the crown fell to a 13-year-old boy who would never marry, never have children, whose kingdom was already being measured for a coffin. His face, ravaged by the disease, is hidden by a silver mask. It is not decorative, it is necessary. What is underneath would make hardened soldiers look away. This is the king who now faces Saladin. 40 years old, undefeated, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. He has done what generations failed to do: unite the fractured Muslim world under one banner, one purpose: take back Jerusalem. He commands endless gold from Egyptian trade, warriors from a dozen territories, siege equipment that can crack fortresses like eggs. And here is what should terrify you: Saladin is not a monster. He is pious, diplomatic, respected even by his enemies. He follows the rules of war. But rules do not matter when you're facing annihilation. By autumn 1177, Europe has given up. They have written off Jerusalem. Even the Pope is quietly negotiating what happens after it falls. The world does not care about your odds. It only cares about your will. November 23rd, 1177. Saladin's army crosses into Crusader territory like a flood breaking through a dam. 26,000 mounted warriors. The supply train alone stretches for miles. Tents, food, siege equipment, portable forges to repair weapons. This is not a raid. This is an invasion designed to end the Crusader presence in the Holy Land permanently. A Muslim chronicler writes, "The banners of the faithful covered the hills like stars fallen to earth. The hoofbeats sounded like thunder that would not end." Saladin's plan is textbook brilliant. Bypass the fortress of Ascalon. It is garrisoned, fortified. Why waste time on a siege? Sweep north along the coast, cutting Jerusalem off from the sea. Strangle the supply lines, wait for starvation and internal collapse. He has done this before. It always works. This time, he is so confident, he has already sent messengers ahead to Damascus, describing tomorrow's victory feast. Inside Jerusalem, the situation is worse than desperate. It is mathematically hopeless. Baldwin's advisors, the few nobles who have not already fled, lay out the numbers in the throne room. City garrison, 750 men, mostly infantry. Available knights, maybe 500 if they call in every favour. Templar reinforcements, 80 warrior monks, already exhausted from defending border castles. 80 warrior monks against Saladin's 26,000. Raymond of Tripoli, one of the kingdom's most experienced commanders, says it plainly, "Sire, we should negotiate terms while we still have something to bargain with. If we ride out, we die. If we die, the kingdom dies with us." The room falls silent. Baldwin sits, slumped in his throne. Standing for more than a few minutes causes his joints to swell and crack. His advisors can see him trembling with the effort of staying upright. They understand what he is weighing. If he stays behind Jerusalem's walls, the city might hold for weeks, maybe months, but Saladin will burn every village, every farm, every church within 50 miles. The civilian population will suffer slowly, horribly. If he rides out with 500 knights, they die quickly. But Saladin's army, busy slaughtering knights in open battle, might not have time to devastate the countryside. The peasants might survive long enough for help to arrive from Europe. It is not a choice between victory and defeat. It is a choice between dying with purpose or dying slowly while watching everyone else suffer first. Baldwin lifts his head. The silver mask catches the torchlight. "Raymond," he asks, his voice barely a whisper, "how fast can Saladin's army move when it is spread out foraging?" The question confuses everyone. Raymond frowns. "Slower than usual, sire. They would need time to reform ranks, but... and if we hit them while they are scattered?" The room goes cold. "My lord, with respect," Raymond gestures at Baldwin's bandaged hands, his wasted frame. "You can barely mount a horse without assistance." "My hands can hold reins," Baldwin replies, his voice gaining a sudden, terrifying clarity. "That is all I need them to do." What happens next is recorded by multiple sources, Christian and Muslim alike. Because what happens next is so insane that no one believes it until enemy chroniclers confirm every detail. November 24th, Baldwin IV, carried on a litter because his legs cannot handle the palace stairs, is brought to the royal armoury. Knights help strap on his armour. His hands are so damaged the fingers will not close properly. They have to tie the sword to his wrist with leather straps. He orders the entire available force to prepare for immediate march. 500 knights, 80 Templars, 3,000 infantry north towards Saladin's army. Odo of Saint-Amand, the Templar Grandmaster, a scarred veteran who has fought in a dozen battles, actually weeps when he sees Baldwin lifted onto his warhorse. The king's body has to be strapped to the saddle. His legs no longer have the strength to grip. They march at night, 45 miles in 36 hours. For context, that pace would exhaust healthy cavalry in good weather. For men carrying a dying king and knowing they are marching towards certain death, it borders on impossible. But here is where it gets strange. As they march, Baldwin keeps asking his scouts the same question. "Is Saladin still moving north?" "Yes, sire." "Is his army still spread out?" "Yes, sire." And each time Baldwin, exhausted, feverish, held upright in his saddle by nothing but will, smiles beneath his mask. His knights do not understand. They assume it is delirium, fever dreams, the mind breaking under pressure. They are wrong. Baldwin has seen something, recognized a pattern in Saladin's movements that no one else has noticed. He is counting on Saladin being smart, on Saladin making the logical decision, the correct decision, the decision that will doom him. November 25th. Dawn breaks over terrain that will be soaked in blood by sunset. Saladin receives his first warning just after sunrise. A scout rides in, horse foaming with exhaustion. "My lord, Crusader banners, Northridge." Saladin does not even look up from his breakfast. A patrol. They will withdraw when they see our numbers. My lord, the scout's voice wavers. There are hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Now Saladin looks up, and for the first time in his military career, the undefeated Sultan of Egypt and Syria realizes he has made a mistake. His army, confident, undisciplined after days of easy marching, spread across 3 miles of countryside, looting farms and resting horses, is caught completely unprepared. And worse, standing on that ridge, silhouetted against the rising sun, is a figure in armour topped with a silver mask that catches the light like a second dawn. One of Saladin's commanders whispers, "Is that the leper king?" Saladin stares, then quietly, "God help us, he came." What Saladin does not know yet, what no one except Baldwin understands, is that this battle will not be decided by numbers, or steel, or superior tactics. It will be decided by pain, or rather, the complete inability to feel it. 2 p.m., November 25th, 1177. The air smells like horse sweat and fear. Baldwin's 500 knights have formed a wedge at the tip. 80 Templars in white surcoats with blood-red crosses. Men who have taken vows to never retreat, never surrender, never ask for mercy. Behind them, exhausted, secular knights who said goodbye to their families yesterday, knowing they would never return. And at the front of this impossibly outnumbered formation, strapped to his horse like a corpse being transported for burial, is Baldwin IV. His advisors are screaming at him one last time. "Sire, we can still fall back. Regroup." Baldwin raises his bandaged right hand. The gesture should not be possible. His fingers barely function. But somehow, impossibly, he raises that hand high enough for 500 men to see it, and he drops it forward. The signal to charge. You are one of those knights in that moment. You are about to charge 26,000 warriors, 52 enemies for every one of you. The mathematics of your death are already calculated. You will be remembered as brave, maybe, but mostly just dead. Leading you is a 16-year-old boy whose body is literally rotting off his bones, who needs to be tied to his horse to stay upright, who should be in a monastery somewhere, not on a battlefield. But then you see something that changes everything. As the charge begins, as 500 horses surge forward and the ground starts shaking, Baldwin leans forward in his saddle. You cannot see his face behind that silver mask, but you know he is smiling, and you think, if he is not afraid to die, why am I? At 400 yards, Saladin's scattered forces start scrambling to form defensive lines. Too slow. At 300 yards, Muslim archers fire. Arrows fall like black rain. Knights drop. Horses scream and tumble. The charge does not slow. At 200 yards, Saladin himself is shouting orders, trying to rally his centre. His elite Mamluks, 8,000 slave soldiers, trained from childhood to kill, are forming ranks as fast as they can. But they are terrified. Not of the numbers, of the madness charging toward them. At 100 yards, Baldwin does something no chronicler can explain. He draws his sword. His hands do not work. The blade is tied to his wrist. He should not be able to lift it. But he raises that sword above his head, and 500 knights behind him see their dying king holding steel to the sky. And they scream. Not a battle cry, but something primal, something that sounds like fury and grief and faith all burning together. At 50 yards, Muslim horses start backing up. Animals know. They smell death coming. At 10 yards, Muslim soldiers in the front ranks throw down their weapons and run. 2:15 p.m. The Templar wedge hits Saladin's centre, like God's fist punching through parchment. The sound is not what you would expect. It is not clean metallic ringing. It is wet, crunching, full of screaming. Horses, men. The air itself seems to be screaming. In the first 30 seconds, 300 Mamluks just cease to exist, trampled under charging war horses, bred specifically to be weapons, speared through by lances moving at full gallop, crushed under the weight of men in full armour, moving at 20 miles per hour. But here is where it becomes unbelievable. The charge does not stop. Cavalry charges are supposed to hit hard, wheel away, regroup. It is basic tactics taught to every knight from childhood. The Templars keep going. They drive through the Muslim centre like a blade through flesh, and behind them, Baldwin's secular knights pour into the gap, widening it, turning it into a wound that will not close. 2:30 p.m. Saladin's centre. 8,000 warriors who have never lost a battle breaks, not retreats in good order, not falls back to secondary positions. Breaks, men throwing down weapons, tearing off armour because it is too heavy to run in, trampling each other in panic to get away from those white and red crosses that just keep coming, keep killing. Do not stop, will not stop, cannot be stopped. Saladin himself is screaming at his officers, "Reform! Reform the line!" No one is listening, because something impossible is happening. That dying boy on the dying horse is cutting through their ranks, like he can see the future. And his knights are following him, like he has opened a road straight to paradise. And everywhere the silver mast turns, Muslim warriors flee. And here is where Baldwin's smile finally makes sense. Those ravines cutting through the plain, the ones Saladin had not bothered scouting because he assumed he would never need to retreat. They are funneling the fleeing Muslims into natural kill boxes. Knights pursue, and suddenly thousands of warriors are trapped in narrow canyons with steep walls, trampling each other, suffocating under the weight of their own panic. A Christian chronicler will later write, "The ravines filled with bodies like wells filling with water until the dead made bridges for the dying to cross." A Muslim historian will confirm it. "We fled into the earth's mouth, and the earth devoured us." 3 p.m. Saladin's personal guard. 2,000 of the finest warriors in the Muslim world. Men sworn by sacred oath to die before leaving their sultan. Sees the Templars coming, and they run. Saladin, abandoned, surrounded, does the only thing he can do. He finds a racing camel faster than a horse in sand and flees. The Sultan of Egypt and Syria, who had never lost a battle, who commanded 26,000 men that morning, is running for his life on a pack animal. By 4 p.m, it is over. 20,000 Muslim warriors lie dead or dying across 3 miles of blood-soaked earth. Another 6,000 have scattered into the desert, abandoning weapons, armour, supplies, anything that might slow them down. Of Baldwin's 3,500 men who fought, 1,000 are dead. Heavy losses, but they have won. They have done the impossible. When they finally pull Baldwin from his horse, he is unconscious. The straps holding him in the saddle are the only reason he did not fall during the battle. His bandages are soaked through with blood. Wounds torn open by the sheer physical stress of wielding a sword his hands should not have been able to hold. The knights think he is dead. Odo of Saint-Amand, the Templar Grand Master, checks for breath, finds it barely. He is openly weeping as he says to the knights gathered around, he cannot feel pain. That is how he did it. He cannot feel his body breaking, so he never stopped. He never knew when to stop. You have just watched 500 men defeat 26,000. Not because they were stronger, not because they had better equipment, not because they were more numerous, because they followed a boy who had already lost everything except his will to fight. If that does not remind you how much one moment, one decision, one person can change everything, then you're not paying attention to the lesson written in blood across that field. The night after Montgisard, Jerusalem burns candles in every window. Church bells ring for 72 hours straight. Priests call it a miracle. Peasants who had been preparing to flee are dancing in the streets. Baldwin IV is being hailed as a second Judas Maccabeus, the warrior who saved God's people against impossible odds. But in the royal chamber, physicians are arguing over whether to amputate. The stress of the battle has accelerated Baldwin's leprosy catastrophically. Tissue that was merely damaged is now necrotic. Infections spreading through flesh that cannot heal properly. His hands, which somehow gripped a sword for 3 hours, are swollen twice their normal size and weeping pus through the bandages. He is 16 years old and his body is dying faster now because of what he did to save his kingdom. The material gains from Montgisard are staggering. Saladin abandoned his entire supply train. Tents, weapons, gold, food for 26,000 men. All of it becomes Crusader property overnight. The Templars alone capture enough military equipment to outfit every Christian fortress in the Levant. Saladin's war chest, literal tons of gold meant to pay his soldiers for the coming siege of Jerusalem, now funds the Crusader kingdom for 2 years. Castles that were preparing surrender terms are suddenly fortifying walls again. European kingdoms that had written off Jerusalem start sending reinforcements. For the first time in decades, the Crusader states are not just surviving, they are winning. But in Cairo and Damascus, the loss is catastrophic. Saladin's reputation, built over 15 years of careful conquest and diplomatic maneuvering, shatters overnight. Muslim chroniclers struggle to explain it. How does the sword of Islam lose 20,000 warriors to 500 knights? Ibn al-Athir writes, "This was the most terrible catastrophe to befall the believers in this age." Another chronicler is more blunt. "God turned his face from us that day." The real damage is not military, it is psychological. Saladin had united the fractured Muslim world under one principle: inevitable victory. One march, one battle, and Jerusalem would return to Islamic rule. Now, emirs in Egypt are quietly negotiating separate peace deals. Syrian lords are questioning whether Saladin is God's chosen instrument, or just a man who got lucky until he did not. It takes Saladin 10 years to rebuild what Baldwin destroyed in 3 hours. 10 years. But here is the part that should haunt you. Baldwin's doctors tell him he has maybe 6 months to live, a year at most. The disease is too advanced. The battle accelerated deterioration, beyond any hope of recovery. He lives 8 more years, 8 years of increasing agony, losing his sight, losing mobility, eventually unable to even hold a pen or feed himself. But his mind crystal clear until the very end. And during those 8 years, he defends Jerusalem against Saladin 3 more times. Never with more than 1,000 knights, never losing. There is a moment in 1183, 6 years after Montgisard, when Saladin and Baldwin meet under a truce flag to negotiate prisoner exchanges. Baldwin is carried on a litter. He is blind now, cannot walk, can barely speak above a whisper. Saladin looks at this broken boy who has haunted him for years and says something that Muslim chroniclers faithfully recorded: "I do not understand how God could give such a mind to such a body." Baldwin's response, whispered through a translator because his voice is too weak to carry: "Perhaps so, that when I win, no one can claim it was by strength alone." Saladin rides away in silence. And here is the final twist that reframes everything. When Baldwin IV finally dies in 1185, age 24, body destroyed, legacy secured, Saladin waits exactly 2 years. Then he conquers Jerusalem. Without Baldwin, the Crusader states collapse in months. The kingdom he saved with 500 knights at Montgisard falls apart without him because he was the kingdom. His successors lose in years what Baldwin defended for 8. So did he win, or just delay the inevitable? Montgisard teaches us something that terrifies military historians. Numbers do not matter as much as we think they do. The Pentagon has entire departments dedicated to calculating force ratios, logistics, material advantage. We have built civilizations on the idea that more is better, that mathematics dictates outcomes. And then you have November 25th, 1177, 500 against 26,000, and the 500 win. Not because of superior tactics, though Baldwin's were brilliant. Not because of terrain advantage, though he used it masterfully. Not because of better equipment, because they did not have it. They won because one dying boy refused to accept that mathematics determines fate. Baldwin IV understood something we have forgotten. The human will, when pushed past the point of self-preservation, when freed from the fear of pain because pain no longer registers, becomes a force that logic cannot calculate. He could not feel his body breaking. So he never knew when to stop, and 500 men watching their king fight despite a body that should have collapsed hours earlier decided that if he would not quit, neither would they. We live in an era obsessed with probabilities. Algorithms tell us what stocks to buy. Polls predict elections before votes are cast. Models forecast wars based on GDP and troop numbers. Maybe we have lost something important in all that calculation. The understanding that history pivots on moments when someone refuses to accept the math. When 500 becomes more dangerous than 26,000 because those 500 believe in something the 26,000 do not. There is a letter Baldwin wrote to his sister Sibylla shortly before his death. It is kept in the Vatican archives, yellowed and fragile. In it, he says, "I was told I would die young. They were right. I was told I would die a leper. They were right. I was told I could not rule. They were wrong. Perhaps God gives us diseases to show us that flesh is temporary, but will is eternal." He concluded, "My hand stopped working years ago, but my kingdom still stands." By the time she received that letter, Baldwin was already dead. 2 years later, the kingdom fell. But for 8 years that should not have happened, 8 years that defied medical possibility, one dying boy held back an empire. So, we have seen how King Baldwin IV, a teenage leper whose body was failing him, led 500 knights against Saladin's 26,000, defying impossible odds at Montgisard. His victory was not just a military triumph. It was a testament to raw, unyielding human will, a moment when the sheer refusal to surrender shattered the calculations of fate, saving his kingdom for nearly a decade against all reason. You have just witnessed one of history's most fragile victories, a moment when everything, the kingdom, the faith, the lives of thousands, hung on the will of a teenager whose body was falling apart. If stories like this remind you how delicate civilization is, how close we always are to losing everything, how much one person's refusal to quit can change the world, then subscribe now. Because the past is not dead. It is just waiting for someone to remember. And if you think Baldwin's story is dark, wait until you hear about our next findings. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next deep dive.